morning to everyone. So as Ralph has introduced, my name is Mtuli Singwenya. I'm going to be taking you through today's webinar, which is the planning your band requirements. Maybe just to kick us off, going to start off by giving you a presentation outline, which will basically entail us discussing on the band losses. And then after that, we then move on to the number and size of bands that will be required per hectare. And then we're going to delve in and look at the bands that will be required if you are a small scale grower, which is more of your 5 to 6 hectare grower. And then we move on and then discuss the number of bands that will be required by a large scale grower, which will be your 6 hectare and above, typically a 10 hectare and above a farmer. And then we're going to flip it over a bit and then look at a situation whereby you have the bands, but then you want to now determine how many hectares you need to grow. We're also going to look into that. So as we all know that if you plant too much for the bigger for your band capacity, this is one of the biggest factor that can lead to a massive reduction in profits, even if your crop is grown in a very reasonable manner. So inadequate band space is also a major cause of financial loss, particularly if the farmer experiences a ripening flush. And during the tobacco curing stage, we all know that the production cost or the input cost would have been incurred. So this is the stage where now you're looking at your profits, but this is the stage again where a lot of things can go wrong. Hence, we're now saying that there is a very urgent need for us to plan for our band capacity before we go on to plant our crop. However, there is always a challenge which is faced when you want to determine your optimal band capacity, because as you know that if you design or if you build enough bands for the peak of the season, then this is where you will say, okay, fine, I'm going to be having bands that will not be working during the initial stages and the later stages of your curing period. And this we've noticed, or we all appreciate that a lot of farmers have got these they undergo through a lot of pain when they see bands that are not being used during the initial and last stages of curing. So before we go into the presentation, I feel it's very important for us to define a few terms that we'll use later on so that we can get a good perspective of what we'll be talking about. So we're going to be talking about the turnaround time, which is typically your number of days from when you fill your barn and until the next time when it is ready to be filled again. Usually this is the curing time plus a day that you would take to empty and refill your barn. Again, we also need to understand what we mean by the reaping interval, which is typically, again, your number of days from the first reaping to the next reaping in the same field. So, as I've said, there is this myth, if I may call it that farmers always believe that a ripening flush will never occur to them. They've got this myth that a ripening flush is very unusual. And the memory of knowing that it is very expensive to build barns. This usually leads to farmers believing that they can grow more with as little barns as possible. So maybe to put this into perspectives, I've come up with an example that I think can sort of like espouse the anticipated losses. If, say, for instance, a farmer is if a crop has got about 20 leaves per plant, and that farmer expects a yield of 2,000 kg, if that farmer was to lose one leaf per plant, this will, on average, lead to a reduction of 100 kgs per hectare. So maybe I'll go back again and give it a perspective more. If a farmer has got 20 leaves per plant, and this farmer expects to get 2,000 kgs per hectare, the loss of one leaf will, on average, lead to 100 kg per hectare loss. So if this farmer intends to go to the market and then they get there and then they realize that the market is saying we're selling, or he's supposed to sell at 3 kg, depending on the quality of leaf, obviously. If he's supposed to sell at 3 kg per leaf, this farmer can anticipate a loss of about $300 US dollars per hectare. And if this farmer again was doing 10 hectares, this will lead to a total loss of about 3,000. So I'm sure you can imagine that this farmer has already lost a wonder feed that you could have walked away with easily from the tobacco sales floors. So I'm sure you can now see the importance of the need for us to plan for our band space requirements in a very adequate and optimal manner. So usually, from us, we usually say that the basic figure that determines how many bands you need and how big they should be is the number of strings that you will reap in one day. For the experienced farmer, this might be known. I'm sure if I can ask a few of you how many strings you reap in one day, you can tell me. But for the relatively new farmer, this can be worked out in a very, I would say, in a relatively easy manner, which is through multiplying the number of plants to be reaped. For 1 hectare, we all know that for a hectare, the farmer needs, or he does about 15,000 plants. If you multiply 15,000 plants that you have in your field, in your 1 hectare field, by the number of leaves that you're taking from each plant, which is typically or usually 2, and then you divide that number by the number of by the number of leaves per string, which is typically 85. This usually gives us a figure of 350 strings. So this means that in a 1 hectare farm, maybe to put it into perspective, this means that in a 1 hectare farm with 15,000 plants, with you reaping two leaves per plant and having a string that carries about 85 leaves, in a day, you're going to reap 350 strings. So if we divide this number of strings that are reaped in one day by the number held in one barn, obviously you know that your barn can maybe hold, say for instance, in this particular case, 1,000, maybe let me say 100 strings, which means you would need to divide your 100 strings that go into one barn into 350 so that you can get an overview of how many barns you would need to have to cure this reaped tobacco. So while this number will give you the number of barns to cure the tobacco that you would have reaped in that day, we all acknowledge that by the time you go into the field to reap again, that tobacco will still be under curing, because you would not have finished your curing cycle there. So which means obviously when you go again for the second reaping, you would need an extra number of barns to cater for the extra tobacco that you are going in for your second reaping. So typically we say that the total number of barns that would be required for a given crop, we now need to consider now your turnaround time and your reaping interval. So here we've got a formula that we use to determine the number of barns that you typically need per hectare. Sorry, can I go back again? So this formula now, it helps us determine the number of barns that are required per hectare. So if we can now then be able to determine the number of barns that are required per hectare, and then we can then now scale it up by multiplying the number of hectares to arrive at the total barn requirement. Please feel free to stop me at any point in time if there's something that you're not clear about. So moving on, I felt like it was very important for us to separate our growers into small-scale growers. Like I've said, typically the small-scale grower, we're looking at someone who's doing 6 hectares and less, and then for our large-scale grower, we're looking at someone who's doing 6 to 10 or 20 hectares for your crop. So the small grower who reaps his crop over in a day needs special consideration, because this guy can go into his field and rip everything and then need to put it in the barn. So this particular case needs for us to have to give him a special consideration. So there is a minimum number of barns that are needed for a small scale grower because of the difference between the turnaround time and reaping interval, as I've mentioned. In fact, the turnaround time, if the sorry, let me go back again. So the where I've highlighted with an asterisk, it's a point that I think we should really need to dwell much on and understand. If one barn at a reaping interval is filled, it will still be full again when the tobacco is again ripe. Hence, I said again previously that you would need more barns. So can I move on again? So I've given an example there for us to get a more intimate understanding of the point that I'm trying to put through. Let's look at this example. Suppose a grower who intends to plant 1 hectare and reap it in all in one day. We now need to use this example so that we can then be able to determine that there is a grower who's growing 1 hectare of tobacco and they intend to reap it all in one day. How many barns will this grower need and of what size? So remember, previously we said if we're doing 15,000 plants and reaping 2 leaves per plant with our string taking in 85 leaves per string, we said this person will need about 350 strings for every reaping. So therefore, we will need a barn that will be able to hold this amount or slightly more. So allow me to go to the next slide. So here I've got an example or a table. So if you see on the first column there, we've got the size of the barn. These are standard barns that we have we currently have. We've got a 3.6 by 3.6, a 3.6 by 5, 5.5, a 5.6, with a different number of tires. So in our particular instance, where we are saying that this farmer can be able to do 350 strings. So if, say, for instance, we had a 5.5, if you can see where my cursor is, if we had a 5.5 barn with say four tires going up, which means this barn can only be able to take 280. Sorry, it can only be able to take 280 strings. So this barn is actually has got a smaller capacity than what the farmer requires. But if we go to the 5.6, 5 times 6 barn, 5 times 6 barn with a capacity of 350 using a 4 tire, this barn will be able to take exactly what the farmer would have reaped in that one day. But again, like we said, that for the next reaping, this farmer will not have enough barn space. So which means if we were to take the 5 times 6 with a 4 tire barn, the farmer would need to have 2 of those for the next reaping. But if we were to take, say for instance, the 5 times 6 with the 5 tires, then this barn is able to take in 440 strings, which is more than what the farmer is reaping in one day. So if the farmer can have 5 times 6, 440, sorry, 5 times 6, 5 tire barn, you would be able to then accommodate all of his tobacco. Again, we've got round barns. So basically, this table can be able to assist you to determine the adequate barn spacing, depending on the size of barns that you have, the size of the barn that you have vis-a-vis the number of tires in the barns. The most important point to note is that twice as many barns altogether are needed because the turnaround times will always be more than the reaping interval, like I've already alluded. So depending on the tobacco and the management, it can be a bad practice, as we all know, to half fill a barn and then on one day and then carry on with the next ban. So it is always very important when we are determining our ban space requirements that we know that if we reap, we are going to be if whatever we reap is going to be able to fill one ban. So I'll pause a moment. I'll pause a bit. Just maybe if there's a few questions, Mr. Ralph, are we all on the same page?
Hello.
Can
I
everyone?
think we're still on the same page because there are no questions on the platform at the moment. So
Okay.
I'll
Okay.
suggest that go on and we take questions at
Okay.
the end.
Okay. So again, I'll reiterate, if I'm moving too fast, please feel free to stop me and ask any questions that you feel need clarity. So we have dealt with the case of a small scale grower. We would want now to move on to a large scale grower. Like I've said, this is a farmer who typically does about 10 hectares. So again, the formula that I used or we used here, which is this formula, just going to take you back, which is this formula. It also applies for the large scale grower. But for the large scale grower, there is an advantage that for the large scale grower, there's continuous daily reaping. So this farmer does not have to say I'm reaping today. I'm going to wait for another 3 days, and this makes it easier to allow for the total requirement because obviously the consideration does not have to be made for the reaping the crop all at once. So for us to deal with the large scale grower, I'm just going to try and stop sharing because I need to share an Excel file that I would need probably for us to have a look at before we go on here. Can you allow me to stop sharing, Ralph, and then go on to the Excel file? You're going to go. As you all remember that I've said um, um, for us to determine our band space requirement, we need to take into consideration the size of the bands, which is in this column. I'm sure you can see me highlighting it, which is the size of the column. And you can also see here the tires or the number of tires that will be in that band. So say me, for instance, if we look at this 3.6 by 3.6 band with the three tires going up, this band should be able to take in 125 strings. Whereas if we go to this one, which is the 5.5 by, say, for instance, 5 tires, it should be able to take in 350 strings. Now, if you go again up there and you see that we've got the reaping interval, if we say, for instance, you are reaping your crop after every 4 days, using this 5.5 band with 5 tires. Again, I'll go again. If you're using the 5.5 band with 5 tires, and then you are doing 350 strings, and your reaping interval is 1.76. I'll go again. If you have a band with a capacity of 5.5, 5 multiplied by 5, with 5 tires going up, and your reaping interval is 1.76. So what this basically means is that for this size of barn with the number of tires and the number of strings that you're harvesting at each reaping, you will need to have 1.76 tons, sorry, 1.76 barns per hectare. So if, say, for instance, you are doing 10 hectares, you will then now take this factor of 1.76 and multiply it by 10, which will give you the total number of barns for you to do 10 hectares of tobacco. So in this case, if we multiply 1.76 with this factor by 1.76 by 10, it will mean we would need about 17.6 17.6 barns for us to grow a 10 hectare farm. Or let's just say maybe round it off to 18 barns. Maybe if we can use another example again, if we say you are now your barn capacity is a 5 times 6 meter with 6 tires going up, and your these barns can be able to take in 525 strings, and your reaping interval is 1.18. It means then now that you multiply 1.18 by 10 to give you an approximate number of about 12 barns. So obviously you can see that the bigger the size of the barns, then the less number of barns you would obviously require. Maybe to put it into context again, I would want to use a more elaborate example. Say, for instance, you are using the 5.6 barn with 6 tires again, but your reaping interval is changed now. It's going to three days, which means you're going to look at a factor of 1.57, and then you multiply this factor by obviously your hectare, which is 10, which means you would need 15 barns, which is you would need 15 barns, which is more than the 11 barns or 12 barns that you would required if you had a reaping interval of 4. So evidently from this, we can see that when we are designing our barns, or when we're trying to plan for our barn capacity, it is always prudent for us to assume the smallest reaping interval. Let me go back again to our presentation. Presentation. Okay. Can you all see it now? Okay. So maybe just to put it into context again, all those factors that we used to determine for our barn spacing, we assume that those factors were on the assumption that you've got a plant population of about 15,000 per hectare. You are reaping 2 leaves per plant per reaping. Then the string spacing inside your barn is going to be 27, and then you've got 85 leaves per string. We can go and modify the table if you've got slightly different values from the ones that we have here. So again, this slide is just demonstrating all the concepts that I've alluded to. However, I think it is very important at this point in time for us to encourage farmers to always make a very realistic estimate of their turnaround time, as well as their reaping intervals. And we also encourage farmers to always check their records when you are doing your tobacco curing. Please always make sure that you keep records so that you can be able to determine your barn turnaround times, as well as your reaping intervals in the field there. As we all know, because it's easy for me to, or for any other farmer to assume that they've got a higher reaping interval than is actually is in reality. Yeah. Again, here I'm just trying to reiterate that the farmers need to keep their records. Yeah, so this is an example that I've just given there. This is also a highlight of the example that I've just given there. Maybe I can go through it again just to give context again. Suppose someone wants to grow 20 hectares. Someone wants to grow 20 hectares, and then they anticipate that their turnaround time in each barn is going to be eight days with a 4-day reaping interval. I want us to use this example to get a deeper understanding of the implications of making wrong estimates of your turnaround time, as well as your reaping interval. So here we've got a farmer who's doing 20 hectares, and then this farmer anticipates an 8-day turnaround with a reaping interval of 4. So let's go again back to our tables. So this farmer has got an 8-day turnaround. So if you look here, we've got tables for different turnaround times. So for this farmer, we're going to use, you have to use the 8-day turnaround time. The reaping interval is it okay? Okay. Okay, sorry then. Is it not, it's not showing? Okay. I'm being told that the Excel is not appearing. Can you see the Excel?
No,
Not yet, Doc.
You can't see the Excel. Can you see it now?
now we can.
Okay. So remember from our example that we're using, we're saying that the farmer is doing 20 hectares and they've got an 8-day turnaround time. So which means we now need to come here to our tables, our Excel tables, and then select the turnaround time that this farmer anticipates to have. So in this particular case, it's 8 days, which means I need to go to my 8 days. And then the reaping interval for this farmer is 4 days. So if, say, for instance, this farmer has got, again, let me go back again, he's got a 5.6, 5 times 6 size barn with 6 tires, with a reaping interval of 4, which means the number of barns that this farmer will require is going to be 1.34 per hectare. But remember, we said this farmer intends to do 20 hectares. So which means we need to multiply this factor, which is 1.3, and multiply it by 20 hectares. I think that should give me 26.8. So for this farmer, the recommendation would be that for this size of barn with this size of number of tires, this farmer will need 26.8 barns in his farm to be able to adequately cure all his tobacco, which is more or less like your 27 barns. But if this farmer is going to have a reaping interval of 3, if we go to the column with 3, and then we're saying this farmer has got a reaping interval of 3, this gives us a factor of 1.79. If we multiply 1.79 by 20 hectares that he intends to do, I'm sure this should give me 35.8, right? 35.8. Should be 35.8. Am I right? So this farmer will need 35.8. So you can see clearly that if the farmer makes a wrong estimate of his reaping intervals, he's going to need 35.8 or 36 barns, which is significantly more than the 26 barns that he would have assumed he would need if he had estimated he was doing a 4-day reaping interval. So if he makes a mistake, which means he's going to throw away a lot of tobacco and resultantly lead to a lot of financial loss. Okay, let me go back to my PowerPoint presentation. Again, I'll pause a bit and ask if there's any questions that need to be clarified. Please do not hesitate to stop me for a moment. Okay. Presentation. Okay. I'll move over to the next slide. Okay. No. Can you see my PowerPoint? Okay. So this slide again highlights the issues that I've raised in the Excel file there. Let me go on again. But maybe to go back again, I would really need to give my recommendation here that we do not encourage farmers to choose barns with a lot of tires going up, because obviously this will lead to an increase in the number of people that you would need to have putting up your tobacco during filling and offloading. The cost of various there's a lot of options and iterations that need to be worked out before the final decision is made. So the cases that we've been dealing with both for the small scale farmer and the large scale grower have been based on the farmer deciding how many what's the hectarage that he needs to do, and then calculating the barn space. The same can also be done if the farmer has barns already in his field, and then they want to determine how many hectares they can grow. The same formula is used. All we need to do is just to juxtapose it and put the denominator as the numerator. Again, for this particular case or scenario, we also have Excel tables that we can make use of to determine that if we say, for instance, we've got in this particular case, we'll use this example. We'll use this example where a grower has 8 barns. He already knows how many barns he has in this field, and there are 5 by 5 with 8 tires. And then this farmer obviously wants to determine how many hectares they can expect to cure safely. So maybe if we can read again the question and then go back to the Excel file so that we can be able to advise this farmer how many hectares they need to grow. So again, this farmer has got 8 barns with a size of 5 by 5 with 8 tires, and he needs to understand how many hectares he can expect to cure safely. Again, I'm going to stop for the last time and then share my Excel file. Can you see my PowerPoint? My Excel file?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we said the farmer has got eight barns with 5 by 5. They've got a size of 5 by 5 with 8 tires, right? So we've got a farmer with 5 by 5 with 8 tires. So which means in the reaping interval, okay, let me just look at the reaping interval. A grower is, okay, so a grower has eight barns, 5 by 5, 8 tires, and he wants to see how many hectares he can expect to cure. Let's see. What are you seeing on my screen? PowerPoint. How can I go back to my so? Just a moment. Oh, boy. Excuse me for a moment. Just trying to go back to my Excel. Yes, it's Excel. Just share. How do I come out of this? Just a moment. I want to come out of the PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, it's sharing, but my screen is showing me. My screen is showing me this. Okay. Oh, excellent. Excellent. So he said our farmer has got a 5.5, and then say for instance, he's doing 8 tires, and then he expects that his reaping interval is going to be 4 days. So if the farmer has got a 5.5 with 8 tires, and then his reaping interval is going to be 4 days, which means that this farmer with this size of barn is going to be able to grow 0.63 hectares with that barn. But now this farmer has got 8 of these barns, which means we multiply 8.63 by 8 to give us the number of, or the hectarage that he needs to grow, which in this particular case is going to give us 5 hectares. I'll go again with that. So this farmer has got a 5x5 barn with 8 tires, and then he expects that his reaping interval is going to be 4 days, which means he's going to do 0.63 with this size of barns, 0.63 hectares with this size of barns. But in this particular case, he has got 8 of those barns, which means he can only be able to do 5 hectares. If, say, for instance, the farmer increased his reaping interval to 0.79 with these same barns, which means his factor is going to be 0.79. If we multiply by the number of barns that this farmer has, he can be able to increase his hectarage to 0.79 multiplied by 8 barns, which is more or less going to give us 6 hectares. I hope we're still together. Let me go back again. Let me stop sharing and go back to my PowerPoint presentation. Is it right now? Okay. So maybe just to round off, it is very important for the farmer to know your turnaround time, the expected reaping interval, for you to be able to adequately plan for your barn space requirements, so as to either increase your hectarage or try and minimize losses or tobacco losses as a result of inadequate barn spacing. Maybe for today, I would like to stop there and pause and ask if there are any questions that you guys need maybe for us to clarify on.
Thank you, engineer, for that insightful presentation. I think I'm sure our listeners have some burning questions. Do we have burning questions? Now's the time to ask questions. Hello. There is only one question on the platform, engineer. So the question goes, what factors, hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Raf.
Okay, so the question is, what factors determine the turnaround times, and are there ways we can reduce these times to below 7 days?
Okay. Thank you for that question. The factors that affect the turnaround times obviously is going to be your energy efficiency in your barn. So it's going to be your energy efficiency in the barn, which can also be affected by a lot of factors. One could be your draft within your chimney. If you've designed your barn in such a way that there is minimal heat losses, or obviously this will sort of like try to reduce your turnaround time because your tobacco has got enough energy to cure it. Your ventilation is also one factor that can also be able to reduce your turnaround time. So we encourage farmers to really follow the protocols that are recommended by Kutsaga in terms of curing, in terms of ventilation, your barn design, and all those other factors. There I can see he's asking also again that can temperature regimes be adjusted to achieve this? Yes, again, this can also be achieved through ensuring adequate ventilation and enough draft within your chimney.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Any more questions for our engineer? Do we have questions?
Silence usually means that everyone has understood, Ralph, or maybe
I think if there are no further questions, I would like to thank everyone for attending, and I hope you will join us in the next coming presentations. And also, this presentation will be shared on our social media platforms. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thanks, Raf. Thanks, Raf.